Look at the snow come down, James, Mr. Wilton exclaimed after glancing out the living room window. I'm sorry, but we just can't risk driving you back to college in this blizzard. But I gotta get back, I gotta. Why? To see that little blonde you've been moping over the whole Christmas vacation? Don't you remember, Mother? Her name is Stormy. You wouldn't understand. I understand more than you think. If she likes you so much, why didn't she let you see her over the holidays? She only lives a few miles away in Olean. She had company, relatives from all over the state. Oh, so you're not good enough to meet a relation, for God's sakes. Oh, Mother. Reddening, James spun on his heels, stalked off down the hall, and slammed the bedroom door behind him. After queuing up his America album, he turned on his stereo and flopped heavily on the bed. As the first strains of I Need You washed over him, he closed his eyes and lapsed into a pleasant dream. Stormy burst from creative writing class with her long blonde hair flying behind her. She looked like the girl from Mod Squad, and James had been too shy to speak to her since the semester began. When she rushed to his side, threaded her arm through his, and began babbling madly about their poetry assignment, he couldn't believe his ears. Soon they were walking back and forth to class on a daily basis, and he was writing poems for her. She said enough for both of them and had a laugh that made campus a wonderful place. She had long, shapely legs and buoyed him up with her big blue eyes. There wasn't anything he couldn't do when she gave him that look. They went to plays, the movies, and then to her room. There were mysteries there beneath the glowing black light posters and drawn blinds. These weren't meant to be solved, so he kissed her upturned face and listened to the wild beating of her heart. Son! Yes, Dad. May I come in? Sure, Dad. I just called Bluebird, and they have a bus leaving for Fairfield at 6 p.m. That's only an hour from now. You better get packing, boy, and then come help me dig out the car. Yes, sir. James slammed his clothes and some unfinished homework assignments into a scuffed suitcase. After yanking on his winter jacket, he flew down the stairs to plunge thigh-deep into the snow encumbering their driveway. His dad handed him a shovel, and the two of them gouged and dug until sweat streamed down their faces. A fever burned in James' eyes, and he ignored the howling wind and snow that assailed him. The last day on campus with Stormy had been even more blustery than this. Their walk back to the dorm was slow and labored, and she shivered and said hardly a word. When he tried to kiss her goodbye, she turned her head. I'm not feeling well, she managed to say in her throaty whisper that always drove him crazy. I don't want you to get sick for the holidays. But can I at least come in for a minute? No, see you later. Okay, later it is, and I'll think of you every second. Until then. Stormy coughed and walked away as a blast of wind knifed through James' coat. Looking up, he found himself at the end of his dad's driveway with snow piled up on both sides behind him. Father was panting and stuck his shovel in a snowbank before climbing into the forced air lane to start the engine. The ride to the bus terminal was like an ocean voyage through rough seas. The unplowed roads were an endless series of drifts, and the Ford bucked through them, sending spray in all directions. Now, the snow was blowing sideways and restricted visibility to half the range of the car's headlights. After traveling a few blocks, Father held the steering wheel in a death grip. I wouldn't be out here, he said through clenched teeth, if it wasn't an emergency. But believe it or not, I was a young fellow once. James flashed his dad an appreciative grin and then thought back to Parents' Day when Stormy introduced herself to his family. She came barging into his dorm room without knocking, dressed in a tight blue miniskirt that turned Mother dead against her. But that wasn't the effect she had on Dad. She exuded such personality that he invited her to dinner with them 2 minutes after learning her name. At Pudgy's Pizza downtown, James snuggled with Stormy in a booth. They held hands under the table while she talked politics, cars, and even hunting with Father. Mother, though, wasn't impressed. She glared at them the whole time and kicked James hard until he entangled himself from his effusive girlfriend. When the Wiltons reached Main Street, a blinking sign at the bank said the temperature had dropped to 0. Curtains of snow dimmed the street lights and cast a pall over the glowing windows of the only open restaurant. But nothing could darken James' mood, for in just a few hours he'd be holding Stormy in his arms. Only then would everything be right again. "Have a safe trip," Dad blared when they pulled up in front of the bus terminal. "And say hello to Stormy for me." "Sure thing, I can't wait to see her." James got out of the car and the wind nearly bowled him off his feet. Bending at the waist, he fought up the sidewalk, stepping in a huge set of footprints tramped in the snow. The blowing snow stung his face, numbed his ears, and half blinded him as he wondered who had made those monstrous tracks. Stumbling into the waiting room, James found it packed with a mob of noisy college students and the luggage they toted. Every seat was occupied along every inch of floor space. He rubbed his hands to get the feeling back into them and stomped the slush from his hush puppies. After paying for his ticket, he stood just inside the door and hoped the bus would arrive soon. The lad glanced at the clock and then back into the throng. To pass the time, he read the stickers plastered on nearby suitcases. Some boasted of fraternity allegiance, while others proclaimed the name of the school attended by its owner. One said, "Male streakers should be hung." Chuckling softly, James scanned the terminal for more amusement. Instead, his eyes strayed across a shiny new Fairfield coat worn by a blonde co-ed. She had her back to him and was sprawled on the lap of a hulking jock. The jock sported an Olean cap and had the face of a charmed bear. After stroking the girl's long tresses, he completely engulfed her in his embrace. Their display of affection made James uncomfortable, so he looked out the door to check the weather. Outside, the storm blew fiercely as ever. The bus was nowhere to be seen either, and another glance at the clock showed it was already a half hour behind schedule. At this rate, he would never get back to school in time to see his girl, for the women's dorm closed at 10 p.m. sharp on Sunday evening. Fidgeting with impatience, James caught another glimpse of the couple necking in the center of the terminal. The girl had finally come up for air, and he could just discern the profile of her face. Before he could be sure of her identity, her boyfriend pulled her close again. James began inching toward the Olean jock and his paramour. As he squeezed between those who blocked his way, he was drawn by an irresistible force. His eyes, wide with anxiety, dropped his suitcase to make it easier to worm through the crowd. The waiting room had gotten suddenly quiet, and the clatter of his luggage caused the girl to break free from her boyfriend. When she spun around suddenly, James found himself face to face with Stormy. With a gasp, James snatched up his suitcase and bolted for the door. This time he shoved those who blocked his path, followed by shouts of protest and surprise. He rushed into the freezing night air, his eyes no longer focused, and his breath rattled and wheezed. Only instinct kept him from rushing into the street. James stopped to stare blankly at the driving snow as the cold numbed his flushed face. A cry was frozen in his throat, like an image trapped on an undeveloped negative. He choked and sputtered, but could not regurgitate the words that stuck there. Tears welled up in James' eyes when the bus pulled up and its doors swung open. He caught a whiff of diesel exhaust as his legs moved woodenly up a set of icy steps. He handed the driver his ticket, wheeled left, and marched down the aisle until he smacked into the back door. Then he dove onto the last seat and fell face down on the cold, worn leather. He lay there until he became aware of another presence leaning over him. "James, are you all right?" whispered the husky voice that only a month ago had driven him so crazy. "James?" The boy couldn't speak without swearing, so he kept very still, holding tight to his anger. The blizzard not only beat against the windows, it now raged deep in the core of James' soul. The blizzard is from Come In by William P. Robertson. To order your copy, follow this link.